Okay, I have kind of an update on a story that I started talking about in previous shows and was just kind of pondering. And now we got some information on this very topic. So what I had floated based on a CNN little segment that was done on their YouTube channel saying, what if Liz Cheney has a master plan to not try to win the presidency, but to run as an independent to strip away Republican voters from the Republican Party to help the Democrats win? Because she said one of her primary goals is to keep Trump out of the White House. And if that's the case, then, what she's saying is she's going to do everything possible to get the Democrat elected in 2024. So the idea was maybe she runs as an independent, unites the moderate Republican voters against Trump, and helps the Democrats win that election. But we've gotten some polling on that exact scenario, and it doesn't look good. What it does is it makes it where Biden versus Trump, Biden wins. Biden versus Trump versus independent Liz Cheney, Trump wins. And so it's one poll. It's not necessarily the answer to the question completely, but what it tells me is stop with that idea completely, because we can't risk it. If there's any situation, even with one poll, as long as it's a, good polling agency or polling institution that reveals there's even a portion of our country where it pans out, where more Democrats go for Liz Cheney than Republicans, setting up a situation where Liz Cheney helps Trump win by running as an independent, then nope, gone. Can't even think about that idea. Completely need to throw it out. So to everything I said before about this idea, now that we have some evidence on it, because obviously it just started being floated when I started talking about it, this is our first kind of batch of polling. Nope, take it out, gone. I hate this idea. Okay, and I'll talk more about what else Liz Cheney could do after we look at this. A new Yahoo News YouGov poll found that in a hypothetical 2024 presidential matchup, and I'm reading from Mediaite, between President Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Representative Liz Cheney, Cheney would single-handedly swing the election to Trump. If the election were held today, without Cheney, Biden would win by 4 points. The incumbent would get 46% of the vote to Trump's 42%, with 12% unsure. Put Cheney in the mix and Biden's number drops to 32%, while Trump gets 40% of the vote and Cheney receives 11%. First off, Liz Cheney getting 11% of the votes, pretty crazy. That's a lot in that type of setting. Very rarely does an independent poll that well, even this hypothetically. But the idea of her taking a situation where Biden wins by 4 points and dragging it to where Trump wins by 8 points against Biden is insane. Now, of course, we don't know if Biden's going to run, but that doesn't matter. What this reveals to me is a lot of moderate or centrists who are more on the Democratic side, who would vote for Joe Biden otherwise, would go for Liz Cheney in an independent matchup, which is really, really scary. Now, again, to be clear, there's so many caveats, and that's why you could set up a situation where it's okay for her to run as an independent, but I just say don't risk it, because the only other caveat I'll make about this is when you ask someone, who would you vote for? What you're asking is, who would you prefer to be president? Liz Cheney, Trump, Biden. So in a poll, there's no, significant ramifications of you saying whoever you want. So a lot of even moderate Democrats might go, oh, Liz Cheney, even though I've expressed, if you're a moderate Democrat, you can respect Liz Cheney for what she did with all of the January 6th stuff. You shouldn't be thinking that she should be president, because as I've mentioned, policies matter, and she's way, way, way to the right on policy, which doesn't mean she's, every person who's right on policy is an absolutely terrible person, but rightward policy is going to lead to worse outcomes in our country, obviously, at least on a lot of issues. And that's why someone like Liz Cheney wouldn't be a great president, even though she does have some integrity based on what she did against Trump with the January 6th stuff. Okay, setting that aside, I will say a lot of Americans, I'm sure, though, once the actual election happened, would make the calculation that voting for Liz Cheney would not be the right option because Trump could win. So I'm not saying that because she polls at that 11% and it's taking some away from Biden in a poll, that would necessarily come out in an actual election where people are thinking, okay, the alternative is Trump. I'm not just saying who I would prefer, but still, you don't want to risk it. You really don't. So we'll read a little bit more. Yahoo News, Andrew Romano cautions, however, that in 2024, the national political environment could look very different, and it's highly possible that Biden or Trump, or even both, decide not to run again. But the new Yahoo News YouGov poll suggests that if Cheney does throw her hat in the proverbial ring, she is much more likely to help Trump win than lose. Okay, so that's a huge, huge piece of information for me to know in how we move forward analyzing Liz Cheney. I think her best option, if she really, really wants to run for president, which I see a lot of that talk going around, and the way that she's answered questions recently makes that seem like something she's considering. I think her best bet is to run as a Republican, not because she thinks she'll win. She's not going to win right now. The Republican Party is still very MAGA. Now they're split between DeSantis and Trump, but DeSantis and Trump are both that MAGA brand. And so no DeSantis person is going to go for Cheney. No Trump person is going to go for Cheney. Only very moderate Republicans would go for Cheney. But I think if she ran as a Republican, she could just get some political wins in, or politically damage Trump, debate stage type stuff. Just run to kind of be a constant reminder of the juxtaposition between the current Republicans and past Republicans that, again, were still very right-wing, were still very conservative, but weren't as unhinged as Trump and that kind of ilk. And so she could run just to campaign against him, just to make him look worse, just to try to turn off as many Republican voters to that Trump movement as possible. That to me is a lot better than Trump running unopposed. And I don't think DeSantis will try to defeat Trump. I really don't, because they have so much crossover in their ideology and so much crossover in their base. So I don't see him challenging Trump. He could, I don't know, but I don't see it. He's kind of rode on the Trump wave this entire time. But a situation where Trump either is going to run unopposed in the Republican Party or have Liz Cheney challenge him unsuccessfully, I say have Liz Cheney challenge him, just so she can beat up on him publicly as much as possible, and try to call him out on his, dangerous actions as much as possible. So that's where it stands now. No longer should she be planning on running as an independent. I say if she really wants to run as a Republican, and try to do as much political damage to Trump as possible.